holding up in the teens, certainly in towns and cities across England and Wales. A little cooler in rural spots, so close to average really for the time of year. Sunny start then for the Midlands and Eastern England during Wednesday, and for much of the East it'll stay fine throughout the day, but it will be quite breezy, and certainly further west gusty winds and plenty of showers. A mix of bright spells, and then the next minute you've got a downpour coming in. Temperatures again close to average, so high teens across the north, low 20s further south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Yorkshire, the A65 is closed in both directions between Craven Bank Lane and the B6480 at Giggleswick after an accident causing delays. On Merseyside, the A41 is closed each way along New Chest Road at Tranmere for an investigation. It's closed between Union Street and Borough Road, and Green Lane is also closed. There are delays towards Birkenhead as a result. In Shropshire, the A5 is closed westbound off the end of the M54 between Telford and the A49 at Preston Island in Shrewsbury after an accident. There are queues for delays too through Arkington, Aitcham and Eastry as you divert. In London, Queen Elizabeth Road in Kingston upon Thames is closed for emergency repairs, causing queues in the area. And in Hampshire, the A36 is closed at Ower for emergency repairs. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The sunny spell that many have experienced this week makes this the perfect time to seek inspiration for fresh, beautiful food to fit the weather. Hannah Harley-Young from Crazy Sexy Food joins me once again for the latest in our Taste of Britain series. And to go alongside the return of the glorious sunshine, she recommends tequila.
To be honest with you, it's more about my total love of tequila. It is my favourite drink. I have my favourite cocktail ready to be shaked for you in a second, which is obviously the margarita. But I think also I just love this sort of general story of tequila. Tequila, a bit like with champagne, can only be produced in the region of Tequila in Mexico. But I've actually brought for you, interestingly, a brand that is London-based. This was set up by Tom and Jack. They were drinking, I think, in sort of 2018, 2019, somewhere in South London, and realised that tequila could actually be quite enjoyable.
Do you know what it's made of?
It is. It's made from the blue agave plant. Now, 300 million of these plants are harvested every year. It takes between 8 to 12 years to harvest. Their tequila is made to be drank with tonic, which is not your usual accompaniment with tequila. Usually it's lime, it's a margarita. With a Blanco tequila, the idea is that the process is that once it's distilled, that is the end, it's bottled and it's sold. This is the Reposado. I haven't actually opened that, but if you do want to have a smell, you can open it. But the idea behind this is that it's been rested, so it's rested in oak barrels. I actually love people's behaviour behind tequila now. I think back in the day it had a little slightly bad rep that you'd drink cheap shots and maybe make some bad mistakes on a night out, whereas now we're actually starting to appreciate it and respect it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Tuesday the 6th of August, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you for joining us this morning. So there was more chaos on the streets overnight in Belfast. Petrol bombs and missiles were thrown at police as 3 officers were injured in Plymouth.
Unrest in Birmingham too. A group of Asian men chased a radio reporter away from the area while on a counter-protest. We're going to be there.
And are we really heading for civil war? Well, that's what the billionaire Elon Musk has told the Prime Minister as they go head-to-head on Twitter. Christopher Hope has more.
It's Keir Starmer versus Elon Musk about how to police the riots in this country. But who's right?
And the Manchester airport attack, remember that just a few weeks ago? Well, the men at the centre of the fight with the police are going to give a live update on their legal action against the police later this morning. You will not want to miss that.
And happy news, another gold for Team GB as Keely Hodgkinson wins the 800 metres race. Paul Coit has more.
I'm getting greedy when it's coming to golds. They keep coming in. Keely Hodgkinson yesterday with 800 metres. I won gold in the cycling. More chances with the 1,500 metres later tonight.
I have a confession. As you know, I'm not glued to sport normally, but I decided to watch Keely Hodgkinson because she had been so well trailed, and I know what a fantastic athlete she is. I switched on too late, I missed it. However, I watched it on catch-up without knowing the results, so I still got very excited for it.
I've been a bit like that with the athletics. I watch the swimming every night because I knew it started at 7:30.
Yeah.
I keep sort of missing the athletics somehow this week. Anyway, obviously I've been watching a lot of GB News as well, and hopefully you are too. gbnews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts this morning. First, are the very latest news with Sam.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 9:30. The top story this morning, the government has confirmed it is preparing more than 500 additional prison places to deal with rioters. It comes after violent protests continued overnight, with bricks and fireworks being thrown at officers in Devon and petrol bombs thrown in Belfast. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police force has said it's now time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. A week on since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, the government says it's now investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fuelling the violence. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued the penalty today by the regulator Ofwat. Reports revealed appalling conditions and chaos at Wandsworth Prison in London, with concerns about violence and self-harm there. The findings in the report highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government's confirmed a £100 million funding package over 5 years and has promised additional staff. Overseas, several US personnel have been injured in a suspected rocket attack at a military base in Iraq. US defence officials say troops at the Al-Assad Air Base are still assessing the injuries and damage. It comes as tensions rise in the Middle East after leaders of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Hamas were assassinated last week. And an update on the financial situation across the globe. Stock markets are now starting to bounce back. That's after yesterday falling sharply over fears the US economy was heading for a recession. London's FTSE 100 yesterday suffered its biggest fall since July of last year. And a quick recap of the Olympic news we've just heard. Team GB's gold medal haul now stands at 12 going into the 11th day of the Paris Games. Emma Funakai, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant took the total to 11 as they set a world record in track cycling's women's team sprint. And then last night over in the athletics, Keely Hodgkinson claimed a global title with victory in the 800 metres. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for another update just after 10 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Well, let's just recap on what's been happening in the last 24 hours. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, quite rightly apologised after he knocked a news journalist's microphone out of his hand when he was asked about two-tier policing.
That's right. In a statement, he said this is a distraction from the critical events we are dealing with. And then counter-protesters turned up in Birmingham last night and turned on the media too. Have a look at this.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Right, I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger, I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Casey, I think...
He looks nice.
Yeah, and if you're listening on the radio, that's a woman journalist, 3 masked young men with hoods on, using threatening behaviour, appearing to gesticulate as if they had a gun or a knife, and she was forced to cut short that interview.
I don't know whether you noticed.
Appalling.
He was on one of those, like, electric bikes, and do you know what the plate on the front said? ANPR this. In other words, automatic number plate recognition this. In other words, I'm outside the law. You're not going to know who I am.
And of course, they were talking about Gaza.
Yeah, of course they were. Interesting, isn't it? The group then went on to the Clumsy Swan pub in Birmingham, waving Palestinian flags. So this is a red brick building just off this roundabout. It's like a kind of Harvester, you all know the kind of pub. And there were people in there just drinking and enjoying their evening, nothing to do with the protests. And the gang of youths went into that car park, their beer garden area, and we maybe haven't got this footage, but there was one white guy comes out and he stood there and he's going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He's got his arms out and he's slightly goading them a little bit, but he's not trying to get involved. Anyway, they kick, the living daylights out of him.
They do. And these, they're being described as South Asian Muslim men. They're Pakistani, I think.
Do you know what? The wording around this is really difficult because if we call them Asian men, then we get messages from Sikhs and Hindus. And Indians saying this isn't us. If we call them South Asian, then we'll get messages from Indian people saying it isn't us, it's predominantly Pakistani men. So we just have to caveat all of the language we use this morning.
So we're saying South Asian Muslim.
We're trying as carefully as we can to be as accurate as we can, but it's not easy, is it?
And it's not because of sensitivity, it's because we want to be accurate.
Totally. But I think what's happened in the last 24 hours is hopefully those MPs and Keir Starmer talking about the fact that this is only trouble caused by far-right individuals, hopefully they're waking up this morning going, maybe there are two sides to this story and maybe I have to reflect that.
Yeah. Now, on social media, you know who he is. He's a billionaire. He's probably the world's richest man. Elon Musk, who owned Twitter, I still call it Twitter, not X, started around with the Prime Minister over what's been happening in the UK, saying, quotes, "Civil war is inevitable." No, it isn't, and it's an idiotic thing to say.
So we're joined by GBNews' political editor, Christopher Hope, from Downing Street this morning. Just give us a little bit more detail on this, Chris. What blows were they trading?
Yeah, morning, Bev, and morning, Andrew. That's right. We heard from Elon Musk. He said that civil war is inevitable in the UK. We heard back from the Prime Minister's official spokesman yesterday. He said there's no justification for that kind of remark. Then Sir Keir Starmer did a tweet to the Prime Minister. He said, "We won't tolerate attacks on mosques or on Muslim communities." And Elon Musk replied, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" The second point, Bev and Andrew, you might agree with. OK, you might agree with. The first one, though, an American talking about civil war in this country, given the problems they have in America with gun violence, I think sticks in the craw for a lot of people. But the wider issue here, of course, is Elon Musk owns X, or Twitter, as Andrew calls it. And the problem you've got there is that the government wants to crack down both on the users of Twitter, X, and the way that X and Twitter can carry messages which can inflame riots and trouble around the country. And if the owner of that network is saying these kind of remarks about the UK, it doesn't help the government talk to that owner about what is being carried on X and Twitter.
But, Chris, he has a point, Elon Musk, when he says shouldn't be worried about attacks on any communities, because ask many Jewish people how fearful they are of going into central London on any Saturday afternoon now, where we have the pro-Gaza marches, where you have Hamas supporters, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, speaking out loudly using anti-Semitic phrases, and they feel it is two-tier policing. And when the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, no less, is asked about two-tier policing yesterday, he strikes the microphone out of the reporter's hand. That's not going to do anything to quell unrest, is it?
No, it's not. And the idea of two-tier Keir has been trending in part on Twitter. The idea being that the police around the country police communities differently. Yeah. They go in hard against white boys. They don't go in so hard against Asian youths if they're kicking off slightly. That may be blamed on different levels of policing around the country. We have 43 forces in England and Wales, and they all police differently. That may stop being differently policed with this new standing army of officers, which will be deployed to trouble spots around the country. But 16 towns and cities in 8 days where trouble has broken out, I can see how it is very serious and looks like maybe a civil war in language that Elon Musk could use. But that's not how it is, of course, in this country, and that's why the government's pushing back so hard against that language.
OK, thank you, Chris. We'll speak to you a bit later. So how much blame can we put on social media for what we're seeing on the streets? We're joined now by David Babbs, consultant at Clean Up the Internet. Good morning, David. Just tell us a little bit about your organisation and how do we possibly clean up the internet?
Well, the thing that Clean Up the Internet has been looking at for a number of years now is the role of anonymous and fake accounts in perpetrating a range of crimes and harms online. We've looked at online abuse, we've looked at fraud, which is a huge problem, but it's almost all to do with fake and anonymous accounts. But we've also looked at incitement to extremism, to criminality of the kind that we've seen this week, and looked at the way that foreign governments wishing to interfere in British politics can use fake accounts to manipulate British politics, to create alarm around false stories, to use likes and shares to amplify extremist or criminal messages. And we're concerned that we're seeing quite a lot of that happening this week. And that's part of this problem.
David, there are 5.07 billion people, or 62.6% of the world's population, on social media. How can you police 5 billion people? It's utterly impossible.
No, but what you can do is police these huge companies that run these platforms and ask them to.
You mean get rid of freedom of speech?
No, not at all. But what we do mean is that asking these platforms to make their products safer, whether that's about tackling all the harms to children that are happening on these platforms, or the way that these platforms are exploited by scammers and fraudsters to rip us off, or the way that foreign governments use them to spread lies and whip up hatred in the UK. So this isn't at all about freedom of speech. This is about making sure that social media takes responsibility. Look, if I came onto your show and I started inciting criminal acts or telling lies, I'd be in trouble, but so would you for inviting me on. And certainly if you kept inviting me on, because you have a responsibility, because you're providing a platform. And what we're saying is that social media companies should also have a responsibility.
David Babbs, what the social media companies have a responsibility to is making money, and Elon Musk has made an awful lot of it. And we hear that the Online Safety Act is going to be beefed up. That will take several months, and that these social media giants, the cowboys of the internet highway, will be fined millions of pounds if they continue to spew out all this hatred. They don't care. They're making billions of pounds. It's small beer for them. Why would they worry?
You make a really good point there, Andrew. And I think the reality is at the moment is that if more people spend more time on X or Twitter reading false stories, inciting criminal acts, that actually makes Elon Musk more money. That's the problem. Yeah. He benefits from this stuff.
Well, I don't think he is making that much money off Twitter, actually, at the moment. I think, he's taken it on as a project. He's an absolute fierce advocate of freedom of speech. And as somebody who uses Twitter a lot, I think under his ownership, it's become... he has, to some extent, cleaned it up. One of the things he's put on there is community notes. So if there is a post up there that isn't factually accurate, then there are notes underneath it to clarify. That's brilliant, and absolutely sometimes that makes you go, oh, that's interesting, I'm glad that's been clarified, but not necessarily taking the post down. And David, the things you talked about in terms of child abuse online, interfering governments, maybe spreading disinformation, they are such different issues that you cannot solve. They all have different solutions, surely.
Well, often, though, different kinds of criminal doing different kinds of nasty stuff online make use of exactly the same features on these platforms. Let's talk again about fake and anonymous accounts, where we're not suggesting that they be banned. What we're suggesting is that everyone has a right to verify themselves, has an option to say they don't want to hear from non-verified accounts. Now, what that would mean is that these accounts, which are more commonly associated with spreading scams, with spreading hatred, but also with grooming children, with working for terrorist organizations, for being used in networks by foreign governments such as Russia, they'd be more easy to identify and they'd be more easy for us to avoid. That's the kind of practical feature which wouldn't make the social media companies any money. They aren't going to do it voluntarily, but it could make a huge difference in terms of everyday UK internet users keeping themselves safe and having more information on which to make their own minds up as to whether an account they're following is genuinely a Brit sharing their opinion or might actually be being operated out of Iran or St. Petersburg.
Sure, but when you hear Sir Keir Starmer say that all of the riots are being caused by the far right, that is misinformation. That's not true. And that's coming from the mouth of our Prime Minister. So how on earth do you say that social media is peddling more misinformation? Even the concept of truth has become very nebulous in 2024.
Well, I think anyone who says there's just one single cause of this and one single solution, take that with a huge pinch of salt. But I think what we have seen here is a complicated situation turn into a flashpoint because of lies spread online. A terrible situation in Southport being exploited to whip people up and direct the anger in places that it maybe shouldn't have been directed. And we're also now seeing social media being used to incite criminal acts, incite riots, incite people throwing petrol bombs, throwing bricks, police officers getting injured, people getting terrified. I'm not for a minute suggesting the only thing that's going on there is social media, but clearly social media is part of how this situation has been created and how it's now, the flames are being fuelled.
Well, if we're going to have an ability for people to communicate with each other over countries, billions of people, then it's going to come with the risks. And you can never eradicate the risk of people telling each other things that they don't want other people to know.
That's almost certainly true, but what you could do is be asking the social media companies to maybe prioritise making the most money they can a little less and prioritise safety and accuracy and healthy debate a little bit more.
All right,
and that, I think, is something that the government will need to put pressure on them to do.
David Babbs, good luck with that. That's David Babbs from Clean Up the Internet. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about that fantastic Keely Hodgkinson's gold medal in the 800-metre race in last night's Olympics. I'm going to do a few laps of the studio in her honour.
Please don't.
If you believe that.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
You'll relate to this one. We've all been there, haven't we? Tensions high in the car as you head off on the latest adventure or holiday during the summer break.
Now, with the average family set to spend about 3.5 hours a week together in the car driving on the roads during the holidays, new research has shown that our relationships could be tested to the limit.
Yes, figures show that 21% are having arguments for simple things like the driver going the wrong way, which we were saying is not actually very simple. That's very serious.
I was going to say that. I'm surprised it's just 21%. Yeah. If I was going the wrong way down the road,
you'd know about
You'd hear from me.
A further 20% squabbling over how their partner drives, yes, and 25% admitting to being more prone to rowing when their kids are misbehaving. It's a lot to deal with, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Well, we're joined now by dating and relationship coach and author Persia Lawson. Good to see you this morning, Persia. What is it about being in a car that just makes things so tense?
Well, I think it's probably quite obvious, isn't it? It's the fact that we are in a confined space, we can't go anywhere, and it can just really create so much tension and stress, especially if you and your other half or a family member, whoever you're in the car with, are going through a little bit of a tricky time. And if it's really hot outside, that doesn't help either. So inevitably, it creates a lot of irritation and bickering, I would say, from my experience.
And what is it about children? If you add children into the mix, it just makes things very, very difficult, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Kicking the back seat and just squabbles, kicking the siblings. So adding children into the mix is just going to turn the heat up on that tension.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:51. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
So it's another great evening for Team GB in the Paris Olympics with gold medals for women's team sprint and Keely Hodgkinson dominating the 800 metres to get her first global title. Paul, I'm just pressed. Paul Coyter's here, Mr Sport.
Did you?
I tuned in to flipping watch it and I got the wrong time.
So, did you really watch it? It's like the old Likely Lads episode when you're trying to avoid the score.
I did.
And you watched it.
I got it on catch-up.
1 minute 50 long.
It wasn't long.
Yeah.
And I was cheering her.
Yeah.
And she never looked like she was going to lose.
No, she didn't. It did for a moment. It looked as if she wasn't quite as fluid.
But do you know what made me shocked? Really shocked me. Kelly Holmes won this race.
Yes, she did.
20 years ago.
I know.
Oh my God!
I was in the stadium when.
Were you there at
I was
Athens?
there that night.
But can you be 20 years ago? Where's it gone?
Where has that gone?
Well, I'm going to make you feel even worse, Andrew, because Anne Packer was 1964 at the Tokyo Olympics. I'm sure you remember
He's
that
never heard of Anne Packer.
I have actually.
Have you?
Yeah.
Anne Packer and Robbie Brightwell. She was the other great 800-metre runner from 64.
We won a long jump medal called Lynn someone.
Mary Rand.
Mary Rand. They were in those
who passed away very young, but that was 64.
So that was terrific. And then we did very well in the velodrome.
Yes, we did.
Very good at cycling, aren't we?
Yeah, well, we are. And the thing is, but when it comes to the women's sprint, for some reason, we've had no success in that ever. And it was the first race in the velodrome yesterday. There was Emma and there was Sophie and there was Katie, and they were just unbelievable.
Finucane, is it from Finucane?
Yeah.
Sophie Capewell.
Yeah.
Finucane, is it pronounced Finucane?
Yes.
Sophie Capewell and Katie Merchant.
Katie Marchant, who was a heptathlete, by the way, and started off. She was doing a heptathlon, and then they put her on the bike just for exercise. They go, my God, she's good.
But I love the fact we've now drawn level with France and gold medals.
We're one less. One to go.
Oh.
We are one behind.
Oh.
And it's the same as Australia as well. Australia and France, there we are, look, 13 gold medals. There we are on 12.
We want to get into fourth place, don't we, the medals?
I'm very hopeful that we will at least get to 13 by the end of today. I'm just going, it's like a gold rush at the moment.
What have we got today that we might win a gold in?
1,500 metres. Now, the 1,500 metres, we haven't won for 40 years. It's Sebastian Coe.
Yeah. Sebastian Coe. God, that's the game maker.
He was giving out the medals last night.
Was he really?
And also Coe, he was talking to
Steve Ovett.
Yeah, those were the days, and that was it. And that was 84 and 80, of course, from Moscow. Yeah. So Josh Kerr now he's big rival. It's just like Coe and Ovett, although his big rival is Jakob Ingebrigtsen from Norway. And there is a war of words between them. They can't stand each other, which adds a little spice to it. You've got Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who is the current holder, and he's been saying, oh yeah, well, where was Josh Kerr? I didn't see him when he ran actually against him in the heats. They hate each other. And it's going to be terrific tonight.
Come on, Team GB.
You know what? Watch GB News instead. We've got a very shocking report soon about vapes being laced with spice. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Most of us will have a fine day today, but across the northwest there's going to be lots of showers around, and it's a pretty grey start over parts of eastern England. Some mostly light rain and drizzle here, which will continue to edge eastwards across East Anglia over the next few hours before kind of fizzling out. Sunny spells for much of Wales, northern England and southwest England and eastern Scotland. For western Scotland, Northern Ireland, there will be sunny spells, but expect showers to come and go as well, so pretty heavy ones. A few of them for northwest England, but in the sunny spells here, 20 degrees. Could get to 24, 25 across the southeast when the sun comes out later this afternoon. But a fresher feel in the northwest with fairly brisk winds, and look at this, lots of showers just streaming in as we go through the day. With the winds coming from the southwest, far northeast of Scotland, seeing some shelter. So here, not many showers and some good spells of sunshine, but plenty of showers throughout today across Northern Ireland. We'll see some getting into northwest England and at times into Wales, but a good part of England and Wales will be dry for most of the day, and that rain fizzling out certainly by this evening across East Anglia. So a fine end to the day here. For many, it'll be a dry and a fine night across central and eastern parts, but further west, always the likelihood of more showers. And look at this, more wet and windy weather coming into western Scotland as we go through the early hours. It's going to be a soggy start to proceedings here tomorrow. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens, certainly in towns and cities across England and Wales. A little cooler in rural spots, so close to average really for the time of year. Sunny start then for the Midlands and eastern England during Wednesday, and for much of the east it'll stay fine throughout the day, but it will be quite breezy, and certainly further west, gusty winds and plenty of showers. A mix of bright spells, and then the next minute you've got a downpour coming in. Temperatures again close to average, so high teens across the north, low 20s further south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Yorkshire, the A65 is closed in both directions between Cravenbank Lane and the B6480 at Giggleswick after an accident causing delays. In Greater Manchester, the A57M Mancunian Way is partly blocked westbound by an accident between the Medlock Street junction and the A56 Chester Road roundabout in Manchester, causing delays. On Merseyside, the A41 is closed in both directions along New Chester Road in Tranmere for an investigation. Green Lane is also closed with delays as a result heading towards Birkenhead. In London, Queen Elizabeth Road in Kingston upon Thames is closed for emergency repairs with long delays towards there and as you divert. And in Hampshire, the A36 remains closed northbound along Crawley Hill off the West Wallow Services roundabout at Hour for emergency repairs.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It is 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of August, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So more chaos on the streets yet again overnight. In Belfast, petrol bombs and missiles were thrown at the police. 3 officers were injured in Plymouth.
Plus unrest in Birmingham, a group of Asian men chased a radio reporter away from the area whilst on a counter-protest. We're going to be live at the scene very soon.
And are we heading for civil war? That's what the billionaire Elon Musk tells the British Prime Minister as they clash on social media. Our political editor Christopher Hope has more.
It's Keir Starmer against Elon Musk about who's right on policing riots in this country.
And remember the shocking Manchester airport attack on police officers? Well, the perpetrators at the centre of the fight with the police are going to give us a live update on their legal action against the officers later this morning. A sort of unusual press conference.
Certainly is. And gender care delays. Find out why thousands of children are waiting almost 2 years for gender care appointments on the NHS. And if it's medical treatment, let's hope they have a very long wait. Therapy, counselling, maybe, but it depends what it involves. Because some of these kids are as young as 8.
I wonder what their issues used to be diagnosed as.
Quite.
Not gender issues. Maybe you've got some experience, so let us know. gbnews.com/you're safe. First of the very latest news headlines with Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's just after 10 o'clock. The top story today, the government is suggesting that courts could begin sitting through the night as hundreds of arrests are made since unrest broke out a week ago in response to the stabbings in Southport. It's also understood more than 500 additional prison places are being prepared as thousands of specialist police officers are set to hit the streets to deal with rioters. Overnight, fireworks, stones, glass bottles and bricks have been thrown in Plymouth in Devon in another night of unrest and disorder. 6 people there were arrested and at least 3 officers injured. Disorder also broke out in Belfast, with footage online showing petrol bombs and missiles being thrown at police. We now know one 15-year-old boy has been arrested after that violence, which involved around 40 people. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has criticised the Prime Minister by replying to a tweet from Sir Keir Starmer about protecting Muslim communities. The owner of social media platform X wrote, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" Yesterday, he also commented on a video showing violence in Liverpool, saying civil war in the UK is inevitable. More on that story from Chris Hope later. In other news, 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued the penalty by the regulator Ofwat. Thames Water is facing the biggest fine of the 3. That's £104 million. Shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison are taking place in plain view of leaders, according to a new report by the prison's watchdog. The prison's inspector found the London jails not safe, with rampant violence, drug use and overcrowding. Despite nearly £900,000 invested since the alleged escape of Daniel Khalif, staff still failed to account for prisoners during the day. The Ministry of Justice is promising £100 million for improvements, but critics are calling for an urgent change in leadership. Several US personnel have been injured in a suspected rocket attack at a military base in Iraq. US defence officials say troops at the Al-Assad airbase are still assessing the injuries and the damage. It comes as tensions rise in the Middle East after leaders of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Hamas were assassinated there last week. The national waiting list for children's gender care in England and Wales has risen despite opening 2 new specialist centres. Figures at the end of May show there were more than 5,700 young people on that list. On average, children are having to wait 100 weeks for their first appointment. NHS England says it will set out further plans to transform the provision of care in gender services. Well, there's concern the cost of university is forcing increasing numbers of young people to miss out on further education. Recent figures from UCAS showed a decline in the proportion of school leavers in the UK applying to higher education this year. It comes as students in Scotland are today set to receive their exam results, while A-level results in the rest of the UK are coming out next week. A US judge has ruled that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly on online searches. They said the tech giant paid tens of millions of dollars annually to ensure that its search engine was the default on smartphones and browsers. Its parent company, though, Alphabet, says it will appeal that decision. And stock markets around the world are starting to bounce back after falling sharply yesterday over fears the US economy is heading for a recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July last year. And in Asia, shares closed yesterday with a big drop, the biggest since 1987's Black Monday. And lastly, a quick recap of the sporting news for you. Keely Hodgkinson has become just the 10th British woman to win athletics gold at the Olympics as she stormed to victory in the 18,800 metres. It was the first global title for the four-time European champion. Meanwhile, Emma Funake, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant also set a new world record to win the women's team sprint track cycling. It means Team GB have now won 12 gold medals so far, putting them 5th in the table. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Much more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So let's just recap what's happened in the last 24 hours. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has apologised after he knocked a journalist's microphone out of his hand yesterday. In a statement, he said this is a distraction from the critical events that we're dealing with.
And the reason the journalist had the temerity, dear me, to ask the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, do we have two-tier policing, i.e. are we policing white men differently to Muslim men? That was the question, and that was his response. Shameful on Sir Mark Rowley. And then, of course, we had counter-protesters turning up in Birmingham and turning on the media too. Take a look and listen to this.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Right, I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger, I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie, I think we...
Charming young man. I particularly like the guy at the end who does the trigger handle
and
towards the camera.
There was about 3 of them.
Yeah, I mean, there was hundreds of them outside Mackie D's in Birmingham.
Bullying him, intimidating. The group then went on to the Clumsy Swan pub in Birmingham, waving, here we go again, Palestinian flags, where they then attacked a man, a white man, and a quick warning, the next clip contains some very violent images that you may find distressing.
So if you're listening on the radio, that was one guy that went outside the pub on his own in a T-shirt, white guy, and he's sort of shrugging at them, looking at them, going, come on then if you think you're so hard. And they descended upon him and just kicked him on the floor. One of them took him down with a right hook and then kicked him on the floor, went really awful attack on him. On social media, the billionaire owner of X, Elon Musk, waded in. He said that basically riots happening all over the UK, civil war is inevitable. And we're joined by Chris Hope now, GB News political editor. He also, Chris, called out what he said was Sir Keir Starmer favouring the Muslim members of this country and not also reaching out in some way to explain the needs of what Keir Starmer's called the far right.
Yes, that's right, Bev. I wonder whether Elon Musk has put himself more in tune with people who are concerned about this violence with that remark. The first one, he talked about civil war is inevitable, and the Prime Minister's official spokesman said there's no justification for that, and many would agree with that. But the second remark, we heard from Sir Keir Starmer on Twitter, on X, which is owned, of course, by Elon Musk. We will not tolerate attacks on mosques or on Muslim communities. And then Elon Musk wrote above that on Sir Keir Starmer's post, shouldn't you, that's Sir Keir Starmer, be concerned about attacks on all communities? And some might think Elon Musk has got a point, because there is concern about so-called two-tier policing violence by Asian mobs different to those by predominantly white mobs, and that's what is winding up people on Twitter. We're seeing it in our Your View messages here from GB News viewers and listeners. I should say, I mean, the problem I think is lots of what Sir Keir Starmer is saying, he's talking to an audience which broadly agrees with him. And we haven't had a single Home Office minister on GB News since the general election a month ago. And yet you see yesterday, don't you, Yvette Cooper being quizzed by her husband on a different news channel. I think lots of remarks by Sir Keir Starmer are just not hitting the mark with the people who need to hear it, and I wonder why that is. I think that Elon Musk may be putting himself on the side of people concerned about the police in this country.
And Chris, I mean, we put in to talk to the Home Office every day, presumably. Why are they not talking to GB News?
I don't know, and I'm talking to them and saying, why is this happening? Because I do think that when you have Sir Keir Starmer labelling anyone concerned about immigration, it seems as far right as happened in that statement last week. We weren't asked for a question last Thursday at the press conference. We sent along Mark White, a very respected security editor for GB News. We're not being called. We are trying to put questions and get the government to talk to GB News. It's not happening, Andrew and Bev.
Well, Chris, just keep asking and just keep putting in the question, because GB News viewers are entitled to talk to the Home Office and to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and there are a number of Home Office ministers. I hadn't realised I haven't been on this programme once since the election.
Is that right?
And immigration has become, very quickly, one of the #1 political issues. Chris, is the Home Secretary saying anything today?
I don't know. I've asked again to speak to the Home Secretary for GB News and the viewers and listeners. I haven't heard back. We're hoping that they might speak. There might be a pooled clip later, which we'll have to pick up from other broadcasters. I just do think that currently the government's communications isn't really touching the side of where the critics are of its approach, and just attacking it across the board and vilifying it. Yes, of course, violence is outrageous and is never countenanced at all. But trying to get across that and try and look at the underlying issues, I think, is important.
Absolutely,
and we're yet to see it from a government. Don't forget, this government is a new government, Andrew and Bev. It's been there for just 1 month. The people in charge, the advisors, the staff, even the politicians, are learning their trade very quickly in real time. But frankly, they've been rehearsing for this for 14 years.
Yeah.
And we're waiting to see them really talk to our viewers properly.
All right, thank you, Chris. We'll talk to you later. And just a reminder, we're going to be live in Birmingham to see the scenes the morning after. But let's speak now to political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Good morning, Matthew. Good to see you. Chris is talking there about the disappointment that Labour won't come on this channel at the moment to discuss these issues. What does that tell you about their willingness to have open, free and uncensored debate?
I would support Labour ministers coming on GB News to make their points, make their arguments and call out the vicious violence that we've seen in recent days that has marred communities and seriously damaged our great country's reputation overseas. I was shocked by some of that analysis by Christopher. You don't go and say to Muslim children in Rotherham or other parts of the country and say, I'm really sorry that you're terrified. I'm really sorry that racist thugs seem to be going door to door in Middlesbrough of ethnic communities, ethnic minority communities, throwing bricks in the windows. But there are people in this country who are fed up with mass migration. No, you call it out for what it is. And what we've been witnessing in Britain in the last few days have been pogroms, and it needs to be denounced. And the way to stop it, Andrew, because we just had a general election in which immigration was a very, very big talking point.
No, it wasn't.
Every single person.
No, it wasn't a big issue. No, it wasn't. The Labour Party did not want to talk about it, and nor did the Tories.
No, they did talk about it. Labour talked about it. Not enough. Talked about it, and they had a party that was explicitly against so-called mass immigration in the form of reform. Every single person of voting age in this country had the opportunity to make their views clear in this general election. And what we have seen in the last few days has been absolutely chilling.
Matthew, do you think you should be using more careful language? You used the word pogroms. A pogrom is an organised massacre of a particular ethnic group. Who's been massacred?
Did you see the scenes in Rotherham?
I'm asking you a question. Who has been massacred?
I'm asking you a question.
No, Matthew, we're the presenters here. We're asking you. You have come onto this programme and said there are pogroms going on in the north of England. Who has been massacred and by whom?
Are you going to let me finish my answer?
Yes, answer the question.
I am answering the question.
You're
You've
not.
asked me on your show. You've asked me on your show. You want people from the Labour government to come on your show. So listen to the answer before you interrupt. What we saw in Rotherham was a hotel housing asylum seekers, and we saw violent, racist thugs set fire to it. Do you understand what the maximum sentence is for aggravated arson, Andrew? Look at the Crown Prosecution website. It is life imprisonment.
And it should be. And we agree with you. And we agree with you.
Absolutely disgraceful. I have
Who's
seen
denying
Jewish
it?
people. I've seen Jewish people on social media calling the attacks on Muslim and minority communities in this country pogroms. Jews know what they're talking.
The issue is, if you use a word like pogrom and you use phrases like far right, we completely take out the power, because we need words to describe atrocities and atrocious political positions as those phrases do. So we have to be really careful about the language we use around this issue. Can I just draw your attention to what Jess Phillips, Labour MP for Birmingham, yesterday, what she tweeted? I'm sure you saw this. It was during the footage of the Sky News presenter that we've been showing, where the guy comes up behind her and swears, and it's really unpleasant. And Jess Phillips tweeted, "These people come to this location because it has been spread that racists were coming to attack them. This misinformation was spread entirely to create this content." What she's basically saying is, it's not their fault that those Muslim boys went there. They were provoked. That is an indefensible thing for a sitting MP to say. It's basically saying it's not their responsibility if they want to go out there with a machete.
I'll address that head on. First of all, your point about the far right. If what we have been seeing in the last few days is not far right violence, Bev, I don't know what is. You should be calling it out.
A 14-year-old.
You should be calling what we saw in Rotherham, what we saw in Middlesbrough, what we saw in Sunderland, where we saw a man with a swastika tattooed onto his body.
He was far right, I agree with you.
Far right thuggery, okay?
Right. That individual was factually, clearly far right.
There may also be some opportunists, including children, who are jumping on the bandwagon, taking the opportunity to loot, as we saw in 2011. All of that is wholly unacceptable. These riots have been organised by the far right, and they should be denounced on this channel as far right. Let me address the Jess Phillips point. First of all, the video footage that you've shown and that I saw on social media yesterday of those thugs in the background of that Sky News interview or report were wholly unacceptable. Wholly unacceptable. And by the way, wherever there is criminality, whether it takes place on a pro-Palestinian march or in a far-right pogrom, and I will continue to use that word, it should be called out, and not just called out, the perpetrators should be arrested, and they should be hit with the full force of the law. I have absolutely zero time for any extremism, and that includes Islamic extremism. But
Can I just ask you, Matt, are you baffled?
Where we see mass far-right riots, they need to be called out, and there's no place for whataboutery. What Jess Phillips said, and you should talk to her because she is a Home Office minister.
She's welcome anytime.
Well, I can't answer for her, but what I will say is the point she was attempting to make was that there had been false information going around Birmingham that the far right were going to turn up and that people were coming out to defend themselves. Now, there is no excuse for those scenes that we saw in that video. I repeat that, no excuse. I've got no time for those people, absolutely no time for them whatsoever. Jess Phillips was trying to make the point that we need to de-escalate.
Did she? But she didn't condemn them, did she? She didn't condemn them, Matt, did she, the way you have?
She basically said, to be clear...
She later tweeted, guys, she later tweeted that she was informing the police wherever there was news of violence of any sort, and the full force of the law should come down on criminality. She
should have said that in the first place. All right, that's Matt Stadden. Thank you very much for coming on. I have to say yet again, I think it's an outrage to use the word pogrom. I think it's deeply offensive.
Yeah, but I respect the fact that Matt will come here and take it on. You know, I've got a lot of time for that. Listen, a lot to come this morning. We're going to be hearing from those two brothers who clashed violently with police officers at Manchester Airport. They're doing a live press conference. That's good of them. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday. An employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant, but I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice, why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things, and if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable, that's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
We don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not, and as far as I can see this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous.
Realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hooray!
10:23, Britain's News with Andrew Pearson, Web Turner. We have our panel with us, the political commentator Piers Pottinger and our senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Why are you more senior than him?
Can I just say, Nigel, I've been dying to talk to you about this. Yeah. We were told after Keir Starmer was in government that it was going to be... Everyone was raving about the grown-ups are in charge, change begins now was the headline. Wasn't it Andrew Marr said, don't you feel suddenly like we can relax and we're in a place of stability? Fast forward a few weeks and there's literally rioting on the streets.
Yeah, I think that's a honeymoon.
Yeah,
no honeymoon. They're divorced already.
Well, there's certainly no honeymoon. It's what happens to Prime Ministers, and he's learning very quickly.
Events.
It's just simply events, that something comes out of the blue, something unexpected happens and whacks you. I mean,
not really unexpected, is it?
Oh, yes, it is unexpected.
Oh.
I mean, the idea that that Britain would go up in flames was not expected. It's the same way that, I mean, Boris Johnson, his problem was COVID. That suddenly came out of the blue. Now, you could argue that, well, we should have seen that one coming at some point. This one, I don't think you could see coming, not to the extent that we're talking about now.
Oh, it was entirely predictable. The febrile atmosphere, Pierce, that has been building for years, really, in terms of resentments of other communities, just not a utopian idea of rubbing alongside each other, but genuine resentment, discrepancy, aggression building up. This was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, it does happen, and there is an element of steam being let off here. I mean, back in 2011, again, in the summer, almost exactly the same time of year, we had a series of riots, and in fact it ended with 3,100 prosecutions, which is quite interesting.
And 5 people killed as well in those riots.
People were killed in that violence. And also, it's at an interesting time of year. It tends to be hot. It's in the middle of the summer where people are either on holiday, and also there's no football.
That's a
there's
very
no
interesting
professional Premier League football, and there's an element in this rioting that is remarkably like the football hooliganism. And I'm sure some of the same people, the police will know this.
Because they go to a football match, they can let off steam.
They
shout
go
and
to the football
shout at the
match and
referee.
let off steam. They go and they like to pick a fight and get into a bit of brawling. That's how they let off steam. If they can't do that, they get an opportunity here, admittedly whipped up by some dreadful people.
Yeah.
And we're in a situation where it is very difficult. But I do feel that Starmer's words have been a little hollow, and we need to see. It's all very well having a standing army, he calls them,
What does it
of
mean?
police
What a load
officers.
of rubbish. What does it mean?
We don't want them standing around. We want them preventing the riots, not actually having to get involved in them. Prevent them.
I think we've got to explain exactly what
does it mean, standing army?
I don't know, because he hasn't explained exactly how it'd work. I'm wondering if it would be like...
It's very carefully chosen words, Nigel, for sure.
Yeah,
but he didn't explain it.
No, I mean, what we don't know is how it works out. I mean, I'm assuming it's something on the lines of the old Special Patrol Group that the police used to have. I remember as a young reporter, they really were thugs, and they were then replaced by the Territorial Support Unit, which is a much bigger organisation designed to deal with these kind of things.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how they differ from what we've actually got. The idea is to have a mobile group of specialist officers who can deal with rioting.
But the problem is, there's no use having them if they're based in London, and this is going off in Middlesbrough.
The idea is to be mobile so they could get to Middlesbrough, for instance.
But that can take quite a long time, can't it?
Yeah, but that's what the Special Patrol Group used to do.
Policemen we're talking about as a group. I mean, I do find it all a bit confusing at the moment. And I also think that when the head of the Metropolitan Police grabbed that microphone after the Cobra meeting yesterday, I suspect it wasn't the question that he was angry about. I think it was the meeting.
I'm sure.
Because I think he came out of that meeting in a filthy mood.
Yeah.
And whoever asked anything was bound to get
to cop it.
feel it. Anyway, that aside, these riots are dreadful. But I think we need to see some action, particularly on social media, where Starmer has said more than once now, people on social media provoking this are also going to get dealt with. Well, let's see someone dealt with.
Yeah.
For example, Mr. Tommy Robinson, or whatever he calls himself, is based in Cyprus at the moment on holiday. We have an extradition treaty with Cyprus. Why don't they arrest him?
Yeah, and because you can't get arrested for words.
But you can on social media. Starmer has said if you're provoking violence, if you're inciting violence, it is a crime. Wherever you do it, wherever you do it.
Well, he has talked about. He has put out false information, hasn't he?
Who?
Robinson.
Yes, he
Robinson.
has.
There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been following his account, and it depends. What do you mean by that?
He's been saying
he's been taking incidents that never happened.
That's right.
He's been using rumours that white people were being attacked in places that they weren't, that Muslims were on the streets where they weren't. But that has come out there because it's a rumour.
He's also legged it over there to avoid a court case.
But equally,
yes, and he will be arrested when he arrives back here for a different offence.
And the situation is made much worse by, in Glasgow, two senior SNP members, one who heads up the socialist SNP group, have both publicly said people of Glasgow should act as vigilantes.
Oh, dear.
Go out and attend these meetings and get involved.
I mean, the answer is people should people should shut up.
Because if you're talking about someone like Tommy Robinson, because there are loads of them, like I said, there's 5 billion people in the world on social media. What you would call inciting violence might be what? Retweeting a video of somebody being attacked by a Muslim?
Or putting out false information.
Which, though? Because they're different. So a lot of what I've seen... people
either or both.
Yeah, but what I've seen of supporters of Tommy Robinson, and I'm not here to defend him, and there is wrong on both sides, but what I've seen from some of his tweets is just re-showing footage like we've shown of Sky News, retweeting a tweet. Now, is that inciting violence?
Well, if you look at the words that go with it, yes, it is. What Tommy Robinson has been doing is that he talks about a peaceful revolution. He talks about calm every so often, then rudges everything up by accusing the government of creating this situation, and this is justifiable violence as a way of dealing with it.
I'm more worried actually about Elon Musk because he's got 200 million followers.
Yes.
I mean, he's a billionaire. He's got worldwide celebrity. He's saying a civil war in this country is inevitable. Is that not an incitement?
This is outrageous. I mean, if I had the opportunity, I'd suggest that Elon Musk would get on one of his rockets and I'd fire him off into deep space.
Deep as possible,
I mean,
one way.
Here's a man who gives $40 million every month to Donald Trump's campaign.
Yeah.
A man who likes to buy power.
Yeah.
That's why he bought Twitter,
Yeah.
now called it X, which is a ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
And there's something sinister about X too, isn't it? I mean,
one of the
if
first-
you remember,
yeah.
the really dangerous films were X-rated in the past.
But all these people should really keep quiet and try and sort of calm the situation down. I mean, that goes for instance, Donna Jones, the most senior police commissioner. She then raged the whole thing up by talking about the protests were about British sovereignty and protecting British values. Those things don't help. If people just stop talking.
Then who is going to talk about British values? Because nobody in the other media is doing
Nigel,
it. Nobody's doing it. I'm sorry. No, hang on.
She's an elected figure.
It's not BBC. It's not Sky. They aren't talking about two sides of this story. For the last week, the only channel which have been talking about white people trying to get under the skin of what is happening here is this channel. So you have to be allowed to do it on social media, because otherwise you just say, oh, just be quiet, just be quiet. Everyone else is being quiet. We need to make a lot of noise.
The extraordinary thing with the BBC, their ludicrous Verify department have said on their own BBC website that they have used facial recognition software and identified two rioters, which they named.
Disgusting.
Now, that is crossing the line in journalism.
Are they the police?
Exactly.
They think they are.
But I mean, what is happening when our national broadcaster is using facial recognition software,
a disputed technology anyway,
to unveil rioters and name them?
Disgusting.
It's shocking to me.
And it shows that they're losing the battle with alternative media, and that's what that is about.
We've got to go to the headlines, gentlemen, because there's a lot more to talk about. There are other things to talk about, but we'll talk about that next time. We're going to go to headlines with Sam Francis, who's been waiting very patiently.
Very good morning to you. 10:32, the top story from the newsroom this morning. The government's confirmed it is preparing more than 500 additional prison places to deal with rioters. It comes after violent protests continued overnight, with bricks and fireworks being thrown at officers in Plymouth in Devon and petrol bombs thrown in Belfast. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police force has said it's now time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. A week on since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, the government says it's now investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fuelling the violence. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued the penalty by the regulator Ofwat. A new law banning some people in key industries from going on strike will be overturned. Minimum service levels were brought in by the Conservatives to keep some sectors running after more than a year of disruptive industrial action. However, the new Labour government says removing the law as part of an employment rights bill will reset industrial relations. A report has revealed appalling conditions and chaos at Wandsworth Prison in London, with concerns about violence, self-harm and drugs. The findings highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government's confirmed a £100 million funding package over 5 years and promised additional staff. There's concern the cost of university education is forcing increasing numbers of young people to miss out on further education. Recent figures from UCAS showed a decline in the proportion of school leavers in the UK applying to higher education this year. Students in Scotland are receiving their exam results today, while A-level results in the rest of the UK come out next week. We're also just hearing, in fact, students in Scotland are this morning reportedly receiving blank emails with no exam grades on their Scottish results day. The Scottish Conservative Shadow Cabinet Secretary saying it's chaotic and shambolic. So that latest line just coming into us from Scotland on exam results day. Well, finally, some sport for you. Team GB's gold medal haul stands at 12 going into the 11th day of the Paris Olympics. Emma Funake, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant took a total of 11 as they set the world's record in team cycling's women's sprint. Then over on the athletics track, Keely Hodgkinson claimed a first global title with victory in the 800 metres. I hope that was convincing. I am very much an avid Olympic fan. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
In a minute now, we're going to be hearing from those two brothers involved with that violent clash with police at Manchester Airport and their mother. They're holding a press conference.
I think this is the most bizarre press conference I've been listening to, and I've covered a few in my time. Most people go to court and take their chances in court. We've all seen the violence they meted out on those police officers, so that's going to be very interesting to see what they've got to say.
Yeah, most people, just like you say, Andrew, would go and have their day in court. What are they possibly going to say? This is going to be interesting. You might want to stick around also.
It'll be about
what we think of it.
It'll be a lot about the racist police, I bet you. Let's see.
Let's see. Anyway, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Most of us will have a fine day today, but across the northwest there's going to be lots of showers around, and it's a pretty grey start over parts of eastern England. Some mostly light rain and drizzle here, which will continue to edge eastwards across East Anglia over the next few hours before kind of fizzling out. Sunny spells for much of Wales, northern England and southwest England and eastern Scotland. For western Scotland, Northern Ireland, there will be sunny spells, but expect showers to come and go as well, some pretty heavy ones. A few of them for northwest England, but in the sunny spells here, 20 degrees, could get to 24, 25 across the southeast when the sun comes out later this afternoon. But a fresher feel in the northwest with fairly brisk winds, and look at this, lots of showers just streaming in as we go through the day, with the winds coming from the southwest, far northeast of Scotland, seeing some shelter. So here, not many showers and some good spells of sunshine, but plenty of showers throughout today across Northern Ireland. We'll see some getting into northwest England and at times into Wales, but a good part of England and Wales will be dry for most of the day, and that rain fizzling out certainly by this evening across East Anglia. So a fine end to the day here. For many, it'll be a dry and a fine night across central and eastern parts, but further west, always the likelihood of more showers. And look at this, more wet and windy weather coming into western Scotland as we go through the early hours. It's going to be a soggy start to proceedings here tomorrow. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens, certainly in towns and cities across England and Wales. A little cooler in rural spots, so close to average really for the time of year. Sunny start then for the Midlands and eastern England during Wednesday, and for much of the east it'll stay fine throughout the day, but it will be quite breezy, and certainly further west gusty winds and plenty of showers. A mix of bright spells, and then the next minute you've got a downpour coming in. Temperatures again close to average, so high teens across the north, low 20s further south.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. There are a couple of accidents in North Yorkshire. The A1036 is closed each way along Moulton Road in Huntingdon, and the A65 is closed each way between Craven Bank and the B6480 at Giggleswick, causing delays. Now, in Greater Manchester, the A57M Mancunian Way is partly blocked westbound by an accident between the Medlock Street Junction and the A56 Chester Road roundabout in Manchester, causing delays. On the M2 in Kent, the eastbound entry slip roads closed at Junction 2 near Strood and Rochester for emergency emergency repairs. In Hampshire, the A36 remains closed northbound along Crawley Hill off the West Wellow Services roundabout at Hour for emergency repairs. And in Dorset, the A31 is closed eastbound from the Merley roundabout to the Canford Bottom roundabout at Wimborne after an accident causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's 10:39. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. You're just getting involved. A lot of you have got a lot to say about the riots, the demonstrations, and the way the protagonists, if we can put them like that, are being projected. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. There's yours.
Let's talk to yeah. So Peter says why we're in this position on the riots. He says successive governments have ignored the problem. No government has admitted responsibility for allowing years and years of illegal immigration. It's always the fault of the so-called far right. If in doubt, politicians should get out of their plush homes and knock on a few doors. Peter, it's not just illegal migration, I'm afraid. It's legal migration, which last year, the number of people who came into this country was over 1 million, with people leaving. Yeah. The final figure was 670,000.
Ed has said, how is Beth staying calm when the other three people are speaking such nonsense? They're literally spreading disinformation while calling for action against people they claim spread disinformation. Thank you, Ed. Right, we've got to go to Manchester.
Yeah, where the family of those involved in the airport brawl with the police and their sister holding a press conference. So let's have a listen.
Ahmad, who's 19, Mohammed Ahmad, who is 25, and their mother, Shamim Akhtar, 56, and they're going to be joined by their solicitor, Alma Anwar, as well. This is very unusual to see people who've been involved in such a high-profile incident, an attack on police officers. Obviously, the second half of that involved one of these guys. I think it was the younger one, Farheg, being kicked by one of the police officers. And then eventually we saw the altercation which led to that assault by the police officer.
Well, the younger one repeatedly battered police officers, knocking one woman police officer to the ground. He broke her nose.
It was awful.
Another woman, a police officer, he struck in the face, and he attacked another police officer.
And what we don't know is what happened before the CCTV footage that we've seen. Obviously, they were at an airport. Did it involve, I don't know, a search of an airport, of the passengers?
Some of the papers reported that the mother was to be searched, as often happens when you're leaving an airplane, and there was an objection by her. On what grade basis, I'm not sure.
So maybe we'll get to find out now.
This must be sure we will.
This is the solicitor, Amr Anwar.
On my left-hand side,
so he's speaking now. We'll leave him to it.
Amaz, who's aged 19, and on my right-hand side is the mother, Shamim Akhtar, aged 56, and on the far right is Mohammed Ahmad, aged 25, also Fahed's brother and Shamim's son. I'm just waiting on some paperwork. Is my bag behind them? And just to let you know, there will be an electronic copy of this, so for some of you whose hand is not so good, there'll be an electronic copy sent to you just as soon as the press conference is completed. And I would appreciate, for security purposes, with what is happening, that if people could avoid tweeting until the end of the press conference, that would be much appreciated. Can you get Naz and just ask her where my bag is? Seriously.
So we're waiting for questions, but normally you would expect the lawyer to outline the case of these young men and then to take questions. So let's see if that's what's going to happen now.
Okay.
Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Amr Anwar. I'm instructed as the lawyer with a team of lawyers to make this statement on behalf of the family of Fahir Amaz, who is sat on my left, Mohammed Ahmad, who sat on my right, and their mother Shamim Akhtar, who is on my immediate right, and their family in respect of the incident at Manchester Airport on Tuesday, the 23rd of July 2024. This incident has given rise to active criminal and disciplinary investigations by Greater Manchester Police and the IOPC. The overlap between these proceedings increases any risk of prejudice if information or material is inappropriately disclosed between the investigations or to the public. The family have been placed in a difficult position as they had hoped that the IOPC would be allowed to do its job without interference. Sadly, it has been clear over the last 2 weeks that there has been a deliberate attempt to smear the family and portray incomplete version of events and thus potentially prejudice proceedings. There has been repeated use of the word context when the family have been given no opportunity to provide this. The family have been subjected to horrific racist and Islamophobic abuse on social media, and there has been a campaign of disinformation in an attempt to justify alleged police violence. As far as we are aware, there have been no proactive attempts by the GMP to monitor or to investigate the further hate crimes perpetrated against this family. I have now spoken to Catherine Bates, the Regional Director for the IOPC, with regards to lodging a formal complaint against officers from Greater Manchester Police. We intend in the coming weeks to meet with the Director, but also to seek a meeting with the Mayor, Andy Burnham, if he is actually interested in the context. I will firstly set out today some of the context of what the family alleges happened that day, followed by a list of concerns and requests they wish to make public. The deliberate attempt by some within Greater Manchester Police or so-called police sources to present a version of events to the media in the immediate aftermath and then to claim publicly that they're cooperating with the IOPC investigation is deeply unhelpful and can be seen as nothing more than a deliberate and cynical attempt to manipulate and mould a narrative of events and untruths. The family has many serving police officers and believe the actions of these officers do not represent their many colleagues who do a difficult job day in, day out. The family wish to put on record that if the two young men sat next to me and seen on video and stand accused of criminality, their family fully support that they must face robust, due legal process. But the family also wish to state that they know more than many other families that the police play a crucial role in our society and police with the consent of the people, and that it is precisely why, when they get it so badly wrong, that they must be held to account. Equally, when they get it right, the police should be praised, and the family wish to place on record their thanks to the police, who for days have had to face right-wing racist thugs causing violent disorder and spreading fear across England. But it will be clear to many who have watched the horrific violence over the last few days that despite repeated attempts to harm police officers, despite the grotesque and often deadly violence they faced, the missiles, the punches thrown, the arson, the wanton violence they were subjected to, that police officers have not been provoked and taken the law into their own hands. In our democracy, we have the right to expect that those in uniform will not act as thugs and will act within the law, and that any force used must be reasonable, legitimate and proportionate. The two young men sat here today, along with their mother and family, are left devastated and traumatised by the incident at Manchester Airport. Despite the clear attempt by some to place disinformation in the media and on social media, the young men sat next to me do not have a single criminal conviction, not even a speeding ticket. In fact, members of the family are serving police officers with Greater Manchester Police and other members of the family in other areas of the country. And Ahmad himself has undergone an interview process to join the GMP. Today is about setting the record straight and issuing a warning to Greater Manchester Police that leaking or using so-called police sources to justify alleged criminality by their officers can only be seen as a deliberate attempt to interfere with the IOPC investigation. I want to start now with what sparked the incident, something that we have heard nothing about to date. Mrs. Shamim Akhtar was travelling back from a holiday in Pakistan. She was feeling unwell on the plane and as a result used the empty seat next to her to be able to sit more comfortably. Shortly after making use of the seat, she could hear a male muttering in the row behind her. At first she paid no attention, but then the male went out of his way over the course of the next several hours to subject her to a tirade of alleged racial abuse. He repeatedly called her a bitch, he used the P word and referred to her as a P-bitch. Mrs. Actor, for several hours of the flight, was scared the male was going to become physical and assault her. Despite her appeals to the Qatar Airlines cabin crew, they did nothing to intervene. She appealed to the male to calm down, but he refused to listen, despite telling him she was unwell. The male began to call her a P-bitch again, and the male stood up behind her. He was towering over her and hurling abuse. It was a mixture of abuse in English and in Arabic. At this point, she became increasingly frightened and intimidated. He was over 6 foot tall and was of large build. The male's wife intervened and told him to stop and asked him to sit down. However, the male continued, and his children were also ridiculing Mrs. Actor. Even though she was feeling extremely unwell, she forced herself up and walked to the rear of the plane looking for a seat. She sat down at the back on a random street, however was told to move pretty much straight away as somebody else was assigned to the seat. She had no choice but to come back to a seat and sit down, and the abuse continued for several hours. The male continued to intimidate her by shouting racist abuse and by being a bully. Once the flight landed, Mrs. Actor says she walked off the plane and walking towards the baggage claim area, she felt something hit her hand luggage and hitting her behind. She looked back and saw the male standing behind her, and from what she could make out, he was using his hand luggage to repeatedly bump into her. At that point, Mrs. Actor began to cry. She was extremely traumatized. She was scared, she was upset and stressed, and she even collected the wrong suitcase, which she did not realize until she eventually got home that evening. As soon as she exited at the arrivals, she saw her 2 sons and a six-year-old grandson waiting for her. She broke down into tears and told them that what happened to her over the last several hours, and Mrs. Actor's sons questioned her, which was Fahir and Ahmad, as to what had happened and who this male was. She told her sons that the cabin crew had failed to assist her. She wanted to leave, but when they walked past Starbucks, she noticed the male in question, and Mrs. Actor froze. Both her sons approached the male and questioned him regarding the abuse. The male was rude and proceeded to laugh in her son's face, and an altercation took place. Following this, the family left Starbucks and headed towards the car park. When they got to the car park, Fahir was paying for the parking. I will summarise some of the details because of the ongoing investigation, but police officers, who were 2 females and a male, approached Fahir, and then, without identifying themselves, immediately grabbed Fahir by the wrist. And I have seen, and many of you will have seen, the footage that has been broadcast by the Manchester Evening News, some of it heavily pixelated, but the context that the family wishes to provide is that if you watch closely the footage, that Fahir is immediately grabbed by the wrist, as can be seen on the CCTV. The male officer proceeds to grab Fahir by the neck, and it is alleged that he hits Fahir's head into the ticket machine, at which point the other son, Ahmad, asked the police officer to move his hand from Fahir's neck, as he was not resisting arrest. Ahmad and his mother, Shamim, were shocked at the unnecessary aggression and alleged violence shown from the start. There was no immediate attempt to speak to Fahir, to ask him to step aside, to caution him, or to simply say, "Can we speak to you for a second?" The family appreciates you have seen leaked footage with pixelation of the top of vital events as they unfold. However, this is what the context of what took place. When Ahmad asked the police officer to remove his neck hold, it is alleged by him and his mother and others that the male officer then proceeded to punch Ahmad twice in the side of his head, at which point Ahmad falls onto the ground. Mrs. Actor also falls to the ground as the officer pulls her and Ahmad down due to the fact that she was holding Ahmad from behind. The officer, whilst punching Ahmad, pushes her to the ground, and she looked up and saw the officer firing his taser at Ahmad, at which point she screamed, "They've killed my son," in Urdu. And as you can see from the CCTV, pandemonium breaks loose at that point. At this point, Mrs. Akhtar, seeing Fahir running towards the officer and saw that he is also tasered from behind and lands face first, at which point the officer falls down with him. Mrs. Akhtar then goes to Fahir and can be seen leaning over her son as he lies motionless on the ground. The taser that is used is a prohibited firearm and licensed by police officers to use, and it can emit up to 50,000 volts of electricity. At no point do you see on the video Fahir reaching for any officer's firearms, as is later claimed in the immediate press release from the GMP, nor is he in fact doing anything other than lying motionless face down. It is at this point, as the officer stands up, he proceeds to run and kick Fahir in the face. Mrs. Akhtar then tried to pull her son's head away, and as the officer then attempts to stamp on his head, as can be seen in the graphic video at this point. Both brothers are compliant. Fahir is incapacitated. His brother is sat some distance behind on a seat with his hands on his head, with officers keeping him under control. The officer then proceeds to lift his foot up and appears to stamp down on Fahir's head. Mrs. Akhtar states that she attempted to pull her son's head away as she thought the officer could have killed her son at this point. She genuinely believed at this point that her son was dying, as he was limp and unresponsive due to being tasered. The male is alleged, as seen in the video, then kneels down, the male officer, kneels down on Fahir, placing his knee on his back whilst he is still limp, and then looks up straight at Mrs. Akhtar whilst he has his knee on Fahir's back and he is not moving. At this point, it is alleged that the male officer still has his taser drawn, then using his right hand, it is alleged, he strikes Mrs. Akhtar directly in the face using his taser as a weapon. At this point, Mrs. Akhtar never, prior to this or during that point, is presenting any threat to any police officer. At this point, Mrs. Akhtar screams as she holds her face. She is terrified that she would now be subjected to the same violence as she alleges her son were. This is the bruising that Mrs. Akhtar had on her face. You'll get copies of this at the end of the press conference. But this is the bruising, some of which you can still see on Mrs. Akhtar's face today. She was left bleeding from below her eye. This is what Mrs. Akhtar alleged she was subjected to, and at no point did any officer approach Mrs. Akhtar to check on her well-being or her welfare. At no point did anybody seek to get medical assistance for Mrs. Akhtar, and as she screamed, as I state, she thought that she would now face the same violence as her two sons did. Mrs. Akhtar then held her face, as well as holding onto her son Fahir. She noticed the officer walked off behind her, and she was scared that this officer would attack her from behind. She looked back and noticed that he then pointed his taser at her other son Ahmad, who was sat down with his hands on his head and was complying. Even though she had been attacked, she struggled and stood up. And so the same officer that had allegedly attacked her and her son Fahir then proceeded to kick her son Ahmad and drag him down on the floor and use his taser as a weapon to hit her son on his head. Another officer then sat on top of Ahmad and pinned his head down to the floor and proceeded to threaten him. At this point, Mrs. Akhtar just stood up between her sons who are lying on the floor, and at this point she can hear a 6-year-old grandson crying and her son Ahmad telling her to go to his nephew. Mrs. Akhtar touches her face and noticed she was bleeding from a cheek underneath her left eye. She was stood there and didn't want to leave her sons, as she was genuinely feared for their lives. And she then noticed the officer that kicked Fahir in the head go over and she tells him to stop. At this point, the officer tells her to step back, and then a female officer pushes her away as she is moving away. Another female officer then comes behind her and pushes her back, pushing her back away again. She was left dazed, she was crying, she was disoriented, but noticed the two officers with Ahmad roll him over onto his front, and at this point he was handcuffed from the rear, and now they were kneeling on his chest. The officer then grabbed Ahmad by the neck and pushed his head into the floor before then getting him up and taking him away. She then sees the other officer lift Fahir and also take him away. No officer attended to her injuries. She was bleeding from beneath her eye. No officer approached her to see if she or her 6-year-old grandchild, left with luggage strewn everywhere and clearly distressed child crying for his father, required any assistance. Mrs. Akhtar was ultimately helped by a passerby who saw what happened and taken home. Fahir also heard the scream from his mother, which he believes was when his mother was hit in the eye with the front of the taser gun. At this point, he has no idea where he was or what was going on, or he was picked up, but he was dragged out and placed against a wall outside. Fahir states that he broke down into tears and the verbal abuse continued. Then it is alleged that the male officer came and kneeled down next to Ahmad, and it is alleged he said to him, "You dirty fucking cunt, you think you can hit my officers? I'm going to kill you when I see you in my uniform or out." These are the allegations that Ahmad and members of the family make. Hearing this, Fahir said to the officer, "Why is your body camera not on?" He said, it is alleged, "I will show you why." He grabbed him by the neck and handcuffs, lifted him up. He proceeds to push his head so far down where it reaches his knees and drags him along, making him walk. It is alleged he takes him around the corner where he can't be seen by anyone else or his brother, and throws him face down on the floor and puts all his weight on top of him with a knee over his neck. He then said...
If you are watching that or listening to the radio, this is, of course, the protagonists in the Manchester airport altercation between the police. It's their lawyer that you're hearing talking. We very much apologise for that language. We did not know they were going to be quoting events from that day. I don't think we're going to go back to that.
No, we're not. Just sum up, if you've just been tuning in, they are saying that the boys, the young men, were the victims of unprovoked aggression by the Manchester police, that they assaulted them first. He also said that the mother was tasered in the face by a police officer. Now, all the years I've been covering cases like this, normally you would expect these young men to make their case in a court of law with a jury, but no, they've chosen to do a press conference, and you will have seen, if you're watching now, we're just replaying the violence, you can see the youngest one in particular, 19-year-old,
the one in blue
struck 3 police officers.
The one who was on the side, on the right of the picture there, as we looked at the TV. Very unusual. I think you and I are both a little torn about giving them that...
Well, freedom of speech. The whole point, isn't it? Let them have their say. But it is the most extraordinary press conference I've ever seen, ever.
A lot of our viewers also asking, how are they legally allowed to do this? Surely that sort of conversation should be had in a court of law.
The other question is, Bev, why have they not been charged already? We've all seen the violence. We've seen the assaults on the police officers. Now, they will argue in court that they were provoked, but no charges, and you'd have thought charges would have been pretty straightforward.
If the lawyer does go on to say, because we're not going to take any more of that, if the lawyer does go on to explain that, why these individuals have not been charged yet, then of course we will bring you that.
Yeah.
Not sure we're going to have that sort of clarification. Their overriding complaint was that the IOPC...
That's the Independent Police Complaints Body.
Commission can't do their job, or they aren't doing their job properly, and they're casting themselves as the victims there. Looking at the inbox, you don't entirely agree.
Now, in a moment, we are going to be with the landlord of the pub in Birmingham that was caught up in that riot's chaos yesterday. But first, a little late, and we apologise for that. And we apologise yet again for the appalling language that was used by that lawyer. We're going to the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11 o'clock. The top story this morning. The government is suggesting that courts could begin sitting through the night as hundreds of arrests have been made since disorder broke out a week ago in response to the stabbings in Southport, which saw 3 girls lose their life. It's understood more than 500 additional prison places are being prepared as thousands of specialist police officers hit the streets to deal with rioters. Overnight, fireworks, stones, glass bottles and bricks were thrown in Devon. In another night of unrest and disorder, 6 people in Plymouth were arrested and at least 3 officers injured. Meanwhile, disorder also broke out in Belfast, with footage online showing petrol bombs and missiles being thrown at police. We understand one 15-year-old boy has been arrested there after the violence, which involved around 40 people. We're also just hearing from the Crown Prosecution Service this morning, that a man has been charged with intending to stir up racial hatred, alleging posts on Facebook were stirring up that hatred. That charge made against 28-year-old Jordan Parler. And also just into us, Cleveland police saying 28 people are set to appear at Teesside Magistrates Court later, charged with violent disorder. That's following disruption in Middlesbrough over the weekend. So those two latest lines just into us on the ongoing disruption across the country. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has criticised the Prime Minister, responding to a tweet from Sir Keir Starmer about protecting Muslim communities. The owner of social media platform X wrote, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" Yesterday, he also commented on a video showing violence in Liverpool, saying civil war in the UK is inevitable. Several US personnel have been injured in a suspected rocket attack at a military base in Iraq. US defence officials say troops at the Al-Assad airbase are still assessing the injuries and the damage. It comes as tensions in the Middle East continue to rise after leaders of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Hamas were assassinated last week. Shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison are taking place in plain view of leaders, according to a new report by the prison's watchdog. The prison's inspectors found the London jails not safe, with rampant violence, drug use and overcrowding. Despite nearly £900,000 being invested since the alleged escape of Daniel Khalif, staff still failed to account for prisoners during the day. The Ministry of Justice is promising £100 million for improvements, but critics are calling for an urgent change in leadership. We've heard this morning that 3 water companies are now facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water, Yorkshire Water, those 3 companies are all being issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat. Thames Water is facing the biggest fine of the 3, that's £104 million. The national waiting list for children's gender care in England and Wales has risen despite the opening of 2 new specialist centres. Figures at the end of May show that there were more than 5,700 young people on that list. On average, children are having to wait 100 weeks for a first appointment. But NHS England says it is going to set out further plans to transform the provision of care in gender services. Well, there's concern the cost of a university education is forcing increasing numbers of young people to miss out on further education. Recent figures from UCAS showed a decline in the proportion of school leavers in the UK applying to higher education this year. Students in Scotland are set to receive their exam results today, though some people have reported receiving blank emails this morning, while A-level results in the rest of the UK come out next week. In the US, a judge has ruled that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly on online searches. They said the tech giant paid tens of millions of dollars annually to ensure that its search engine was the default on smartphones and browsers. Its parent company, though, Alphabet, says it will appeal that decision. Stock markets around the world are now starting to bounce back after falling sharply over fears the US economy was heading for a recession. London's FTSE 100 yesterday suffered its biggest fall since July last year, and in Asia, shares closed with a big drop, the biggest fall since 1987's Black Monday. And one last update for you on the Olympics before we hand back to Andrew and Bev. Keely Hodgkinson has become just the 10th British woman to win athletics gold at the Olympics as she stormed to victory in the 800 metres. It was a first global title for the 4-time European champion. Meanwhile, Emma Funakai, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant also set a new world record to win the women's team sprint track cycling. It means Team GB have now won 12 gold medals at the Games so far, putting them 5th in the table. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update just after 11 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom.
Caught in the act.
You were a bit late with your digestive biscuit there, weren't you, Andrew?
Beverly bought them. Shock horror. Normally me.
Anyway,
we need digestive biscuits to delay the shock because we were both pretty surprised by what we've just heard. My worry about that, actually, is that it's going to add to the real sense of chaos and disorder by talking so openly about what is going to be tried in court at some point.
This is the Manchester Airport. kerfuffle, violent fight between those two gentlemen that we've just seen in that wood-panelled room in Manchester with their mother, and the police officers that were involved. 2 women, I think, and maybe 2 women and 1 man, and that was quite extraordinary, sitting there listening to them explaining the backstory. What we didn't know, and I said before, what we didn't know was the events that gave rise to it. And apparently, Mum was on a plane coming home, some guy on the plane giving her racial abuse. She gets off the plane upset. The brothers see him in Starbucks and go and have a word with him. Then they make their way to the car park. By the time they get to the car park, the police are there. So what happened in that Starbucks? And who rang the police to say, you want to go and feel the collars of those two?
And why did the police feel, if the lawyer's version of the events is right, did the police immediately physically apprehend one of the 2 brothers? That we don't know.
Yeah. Well, you have let us know your thoughts on that very clearly on the gbnews.com/you'll say. If you need to get it off your chest, you know where we are. Right, another chaotic 24 hours of riots across the country. Just moments ago, we learnt that 28 people have been charged and will appear in courts today following the disorder in Middlesbrough.
So we're going to recap on what's happened in those last 24 hours. First of all, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Smart Rowley apologised after he deliberately knocked a journalist's microphone out of his hand after he left the Cobra meeting, when the journalist had the temerity to ask a completely legitimate question: is there 2-tier policing in this country?
He clearly came out of that meeting a bit wound up, though. We just need to know what was said. And also then, of course, there were protesters turned up in Birmingham. Now, according to Jess Phillips, they were made to do this.
That's the Home Office Minister.
Because the far right apparently goaded them and agitated them to coming out and having a row, and they obviously thought they would, and they took over this roundabout. They ragged their cars around there with absolute impunity. As you can see, no police there, no high-vis jackets, nobody in riot masks. And you wonder why we're asking questions about whether people are treated differently, dependent on their identity in this country. Have a look at this as well.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well, because...
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Right, I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger, I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie, I think we...
And that trigger of a gun there, right down the lens of the camera, that's reassuring, isn't it?
And then they went on to, this group of young Muslim men, the Clumsy Swan pub in Birmingham, and they were waving Palestinian flags. Of course, that has to get involved into the mix. And they attacked a man. A quick warning here. This clip contains some very violent images that some of you may find distressing.
So that guy had gone out into the beer garden on his own and was just stood there in his T-shirt, and he was slightly sort of going, come on, then, if you think you're hard enough, but he was clearly not involved. He's not there politically. He'd obviously just wandered out having a pint. So let's go now to Charlie Peters, who's at that pub in Birmingham. Good morning, Charlie. First of all, do we know the condition of that victim of that assault?
Well, we'll be speaking to the assistant manager of this pub in a moment, who'll have more information on that individual, but we've not seen any updates from the authorities who attended this scene last night. But we do know that while that man was out front here at the Clumsy Swan pub in Yardley, everybody else was inside barricading themselves. After that masked mob, many of those men armed with machetes of South Asians descended onto the scene after a prior protest at Bordsley Green, about half a mile away from this location. They started gathering about 5 p.m. on a roundabout by a McDonald's upon reports that a so-called far-right protest, an anti-immigration protest, would be gathering there. No such protest occurred, but we did see that arrival of men in masks, many of them carrying weapons and threatening journalists. They then moved here, and we can see some of the damage to the pub from last night. This window smashed in, and there's also some evidence of some of the barricading that took place last night. It was a karaoke night here at the pub. There were families inside, children, granddaughters attending this event, when suddenly hundreds of men arrived. And I've watched some of the live streams of that footage last night, where those who were actually on their way to that location were saying that they were there to dominate and intimidate people. There was also a live stream of a police officer saying that what happened here last night was no different to a scuffle you might see on a Saturday night. Well, one person who did witness the scenes last night is the assistant manager, Linda, who joins me now. Linda, just talk us through what happened last night and your experience of what occurred.
basically, we knew the march was coming down Stony Lane, so I just got all the customers in, got the stalls in and everything, and locked up the pub. And then, unfortunately, a customer did get out. He got hit a couple of times, and it just escalated from there. So they tried to boot the door in, they broke the glass, broke the handle over there, and just trying to intimidate everybody.
Have you been able to speak to that man who was injured in that attack?
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine
Yeah,
now.
he's fine. Yeah.
And what was the scene like inside when it started? You told me earlier you were barricading yourselves inside the pub.
Yes, because they were trying to boot the doors in.
And how did you barricade the doors?
With the tables and chairs and customers and stuff, and just stopped them.
What were you thinking in that moment? Were you terrified they could break in?
Well, yeah, it was scary. I've got kids in there. It was karaoke, there was children in there, staff in there, everything. So, no, it was scary. It was really scary.
And have the police been in touch today after they eventually
No.
attended? They've not been in touch at all?
No.
And why do you think that is? I mean, was there a sense of nervousness that they might avoid this location last night?
I had no idea. In all honesty, but I don't know. You'd have to speak to them, but I don't know.
Well, we've tried speaking to West Midlands Police this morning. We've had limited response so far. I mean, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, Craig Guilford, said that some counter-protests are understandable, but they're unhelpful. Do you think these protests are getting out of hand now when pubs are being targeted?
To be quite honest, I don't do politics. I just get up, go to work and go home. I don't do the politics side of it. That's for the other people to sort out. I just do what I do.
Are you concerned that what happened last night could happen here again due to the quite limited policing response at the time, as many eyewitnesses said?
They seem to be going from one area to the next, and I think once they've done what they want to do, they carry on somewhere else. So I don't know that they'll come back on themselves. So I doubt it. I doubt they'll come back.
But it could be a different pub next that gets in this sort of trouble.
It could be, yeah. Just be prepared. Yeah.
We see some repair work going on this morning to deal with a smashed window here. Are you going to be trying to tell your customers to reassure people they can come back to this pub after last night?
They already know, because the regulars know the area, they know the pub, but they won't stop them coming in.
Yeah.
They're loyal. They'll be back.
And just describe some of the scenes inside at the time. I mean, it was a karaoke night, you told me earlier. So there were families
The
in there.
karaoke had finished, so that finished at 7. So there was still a few people in, and young kids in. So it was really scary for them, more for the kids than anything.
And did you hear anything that was being chanted outside?
No, I didn't hear anything. Couldn't hear it because we were all screaming and trying to sort things out on the inside. So, and with those windows, you can't really hear.
And what's this area normally like? Is it peaceful?
Yeah, God, yeah, round here, yeah.
So they came from quite a distance from that original protest in Borsley Green, about half a mile up the road or so, right?
It makes no sense why they came down here.
Yeah.
Why I don't know.
I saw one live stream which was supported by another clip where people were saying that they thought the EDL were incited. Are any of your customers from the EDL?
No, not at all. No. Every customer that was in there yesterday and staff are regulars, and no.
And you must think as though some of those customers are a bit nervous that they're just going to be targeted in the street after what happened last night, or at all?
No, it's just people trying to just stir it up, just to make it more. I don't know. No, there's no EDL. There's none of that rubbish. No.
Well, Linda, thank you very much. Well, the clear-up operation continues here at the Clumsy Swan pub in Yardley after that mass mob descended on the location. But there's a sense here that this place is normally very peaceful. What happened last night was out of the ordinary and was very concerning for the families inside.
All right, that's Charlie Peters in Birmingham Yardley. Now, what's interesting about Birmingham Yardley?
Lovely Linda.
Lovely, wasn't she? Salt of the earth.
Great.
Typical pub governor.
Love it.
21% of that constituency that voted in the last general election is Muslim. And what I think is really extraordinary, the pub was roughed up, people barricade themselves in, terrifying, frankly, and no police presence this morning. Maybe he's even been to see is everybody OK.
Amazing that, isn't it?
Is that called two-tier policing, Keir Starmer? It sounds like it to me. It feels like it to me. And Jess Phillips is the local MP. She's also a government minister, and she blamed provocation on the Muslims turning up there. And it was only some hours later she put out something else on social media to clarify her position. But it doesn't seem very fair to me.
Me neither. Right, now several countries are warning people not to travel to Britain in the face of the unrest. So joining us now is travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minnow. Morning, Lisa. We're normally chatting to you about relatively happy issues around leaving this country. This time we're talking about people not wanting to come here. Who has said what? Which countries, Lisa?
So what we've had is 6 countries now that are warning their their populations that if they're coming to the UK to take care because of these protests that we've seen across the country. Now we're talking about Australia, India, Nigeria, Malaysia, and one other country that I've completely forgotten. But it is concerning because I think we've had these protests over the last few days, and it does give that impression to people from parts of the world that don't perhaps understand that, tourists don't generally go to Rotherham or places like that, that actually it is going to be an issue. And it's a big part of our economy. 31 million people visit the UK every year, and tourism is worth about £271 billion to our economy. So it's a big thing. So anything that actually puts people off coming to the UK isn't going to be good for us in the UK at all.
So are they actually saying don't go at all, or if you do go, proceed with care, Lisa? What are they saying?
They're saying proceed with care, and actually it's very similar to what we would have for our own Foreign and Commonwealth Office when they issue those kind of alerts for us when we're going to other parts of the world and there's perhaps been sort of demonstrations or riots in those countries as well. So when we had problems in France last year, of course, we had the same kind of advice given out to our British tourists going to France. What's unusual is just, I think, the scale of the fact that, the scale of the riots and the fact that they have gone on into such large different kind of places across the UK has meant that it has seen countries that would normally issue these kind of warnings, issuing them on this occasion.
OK. Thank you very much, Lisa. I'd also just like to defend Rotherham, because Lisa then said you wouldn't necessarily go to Rotherham as a tourist.
It wouldn't be
I know what she means.
Yeah,
you might.
It probably isn't top of the list if you want to go and see the West End shows or something. London versus Rotherham.
If you're coming from Malaysia.
Bath versus Rotherham. But we like Rotherham, obviously.
We love Rotherham. We love all our northern viewers. GBNews is very popular up north. I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, she's right. Australia, Indonesia, Nigeria and Malaysia, they've said that...
The UAE as well.
And the UAE, thank you, should exercise a degree of caution and avoid areas where protests are occurring due to the potential for disruption and violence. Although, as Linda, our assistant pub landlord there, said, we just get on with it. Yeah. Our regulars know it's safe, we're fine, and I love that British spirit.
And we don't do politics, she said. Very clever.
It's a bit of a curveball for Charlie Peters. Up next, find out who's just been elected as the new First Minister of Wales. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on the show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think pretty fairly priced products. And even more so, go and see the gardens. As we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A little bit of breaking news, particularly interesting if you're in Wales. The new Welsh Labour leader, Eleanor Morgan, has been elected First Minister of Wales, succeeding Vaughan Gething, who lasted about 5 minutes. She won with the vote of 28 Senate members. I think she is the first Welsh First Minister who is female. Nigel?
That's right.
Nigel
That's right.
Nelson?
Yes,
yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Because her predecessor, Vaughan Gething, who had to go because he lost a vote of no confidence, was the first black First Minister in the whole of Europe.
Yes, lots of firsts there in Wales.
Lots of firsts, yeah. That's Nigel Nelson, of course, he's back, and Piers Pottinger's back. Apparently we've been attacked for being woke. Piers,
well, I'm not doing that.
Well, no,
Three of them have been called woke lefties.
I don't have
this
ever
morning.
been called woke before, but anyway, we don't mind. Look, you guys want to talk about a story that I think is going to wind people up even more. Labour's going to end the use of large military sites to house asylum seekers and going to put migrants in houses around the country.
Yeah, this isn't actually new. This is what was the policy back in about 2018 under the Tories.
Right.
But bear in mind, things are different now. Back then, you were talking about 200 people crossing the channel in boats. Now, obviously, we're talking about 40,000. So as a whole, the challenge is much greater. But the idea is a good one. It should be cheaper. What you do is there are about 260,000 empty properties around the country for various reasons. Some of it's student accommodation not being used. Some of it is council housing.
Care homes.
Well, if it's not being used.
I think if they don't handle this very carefully, Piers, this could backfire horribly. Because why are all these houses empty? There are 15,000 people on the housing waiting list in Manchester. Manchester have had a lot of problems with these riots and disturbances. Oh, and now we find asylum seekers are going to get these houses, are they?
Yeah.
That's not going to go down well.
No, it isn't going to go down well, and it's all a question of how well it's managed and how well it's implemented. And I must say, I don't know who's responsible, which ministry is responsible for this. I mean, Angela Rayner's supposedly in charge of housing, which makes you...
It's an Yvette Cooper initiative.
Well, I mean, she's at least a bit more experienced, but she's got enough on her plate at the moment as Home Secretary. Anyway, I personally think this is a bizarre idea that's going to take time. It's going to cost a lot more money just by the sheer admin right surrounding moving families or individuals into these houses, and I'd be amazed if it works.
We've just been in Birmingham, where we've had this disturbance in Yardley, and I'm just looking at the housing waiting list there. Birmingham, 24,000 people.
I mean, can I just say that these won't be homes taken off the housing waiting list? How do you know? Well, because they won't. Because I mean, this.
Well, where are they going to find them?
There will be things like student accommodation not being used. There will be homes of multiple occupancy, not for families, but for single people.
But there'll be single people waiting for
local authorities do have a load of housing that actually isn't being used. Give you an example. That we've got near to me a big family of Syrian refugees. They moved into a 6-bedroomed house. There was a bit of local objection to this, but the whole point was this house couldn't find find a large enough family on the housing waiting list to house them. The housing association were to sell it, so it'd be lost to social housing stock. Now it houses Syrian refugees who have assimilated with the community absolutely brilliantly.
Is that a 6-bedroom house?
Yes.
I still see huge problems with this.
I think it's got the potential
would have been
to
sold
go
off.
very badly wrong.
I can see the pros and cons in a way.
And I'm also, I mean, the house building scheme of Angela Rayner is completely mad. And if you look at the targets she's allocated, it has been allocated purely on political grounds.
Yeah.
Conservative MPs and conservative constituencies have got much bigger targets than Labour ones. I wonder why.
And they're not building very much in London either. And London's got a huge housing shortage.
Yes, it has, and that's the whole point of the new house building programme. You're talking about, if this works, and I sort of caveat it with an if this works, you're talking about 300,000 new homes a year, with many of those being affordable homes. Now, that was the target the previous government set and never met. So the issue, the real problem is going to be planning, and I think Labour's biggest challenge over the next 5 years will be the reform of planning laws.
Well, Labour's biggest challenge over the next 5 years is going to be dealing with immigration, because we'll have 300,000 new people arriving in this country in the next month, the way things are going.
The issue with this moving people into private homes, let's say, that are just stood empty, is I can see the benefit, because when you put 1,000 men in one area, be it in a Scampton or a hotel, that changes that area so significantly. That's why you get these flashpoints. I can see the benefit of distributing people all over the country. However, I can also sense the audience screaming at the TV and going, Bev, my son would love a house.
Absolutely
My
right.
daughter has been on the housing list. Or my son. How is it possible that we managed to find
Because it's different housing stock. The point basically
They'll
is...
be
that
overcharged as well.
I mean, the other tricky bit is making sure local authorities will carry it out. That if you take my home county of Kent, for instance, they are overwhelmed with unaccompanied children. Can't get them round to other local authorities. So there are things like that that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
It's just going to be the number one issue, isn't it?
And it's all...
Migrants and housing them and where they're going to go, and they're doing nothing.
It's also
not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent. If you find out you can get a 6-bedroom house for you and your Syrian kids, marvellous. Let's get on that dinghy. Because that's the problem. We've taken away the deterrent by taking away Rwanda. What is their plan?
There isn't a plan, and they don't have... I mean, we haven't yet found this new czar who's supposed to be in charge of border control. Nothing is happening. They've stopped Rwanda. They haven't got someone in charge of, as they mentioned in the election campaign they were going to do. Nothing is happening. I think in the last 2 weeks, 3,000 people have come in on the dinghies alone. This is out of control, and this is... like it or not, the main underlying issue of these riots.
I agree.
And it's not being dealt with.
OK, Nigel Nelson, Piers Pottinger, thank you.
Always a joy.
As always. Time for your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 11:32. The top story this morning. The government has now confirmed it's preparing more than 500 additional prison places to deal with rioters. It comes after violent protests continued overnight, with bricks and fireworks being thrown at officers in Devon and petrol bombs thrown in Belfast. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police force has said it's time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. A week on since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, the government's also investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fuelling the violence. Elland Morgans told the Senedd that it's an honour of her life to be nominated as the first woman to serve as the First Minister of Wales. In her first speech just moments ago, she's paid tribute to her predecessors, including Vaughan Gething. She's also shared her hope to add a vibrant splash of colour to her role, declaring the grey suits are out. Baroness Morgans received 28 votes, defeating the Conservatives and Plaid Cymru nominees. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat. A report has revealed the appalling conditions and chaos at Wandsworth Prison in London, with concerns raised about violence, self-harm and drugs. The findings highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government has confirmed a £100 million funding package over the next 5 years and is promising additional staff. A new law banning some people in key industries from going on strike is set to be overturned, we understand. Minimum service levels were brought in by the Conservative government to keep some sectors running after more than a year of disruptive industrial action. However, today the Labour government has said it will be removing that law as part of the Employment Rights Bill. They say that will reset industrial relations. And stock markets around the world are starting to bounce back today after falling sharply over fears the US economy was heading for recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July last year. And Team GB's gold medal haul now stands at 12 as we head into the 11th day of the Paris Olympics. Emma Foucanet, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant took the total to 11 yesterday as they set a world record in track cycling's women's team sprint. And then over on the athletics track, Keely Hodgkinson claimed a first global title with victory in the 800 metres. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update at 12 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain. And Emily is doing some promiscuous co-presenting this week.
Yes.
Today it's Cameron, marvellous.
I'm going through everyone. I'm in the hot seat for the first time. Can't believe it.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it today. Of course, we've got so much to digest and talk about. Yet another night of unrest, more rioting. We're going to be talking about the issue of two-tier policing because what happened in Birmingham yesterday evening hasn't been reported in the same way as other events that we've seen, violent protests elsewhere. We want to dig into that. I mean, also talk about these prison spaces that have suddenly appeared. Where are they? What are they going to be like?
Exactly. The Justice Minister suggesting that courts are going to sit overnight to try and process all these cases. But where on earth, as you say, Emily, are these spaces going to come from in the prison, especially if everybody is being put on remand?
Yeah, so lots and lots to talk about. Also, that rather bizarre press conference in Manchester following that incident at the airport. I know you showed quite a bit of it, but lots of questions there. We were talking about how will Greater Manchester Police respond to this? Why haven't charges already been made?
They haven't already been made.
And why have they done this press conference? Obviously, they want to get their story ahead.
Well,
but what else is there to this?
Backside covering exercise.
You get your story out in court. You get absolutely every
traditional
opportunity to... Yeah. Exactly.
Very, very odd indeed.
The defence makes its case, the prosecution makes its case.
Lots of damning allegations against Greater Manchester Police, so we have to see how they are going to respond maybe in the next few hours. Keep in touch. But of course, we can't go away without saying big up Team GB. Olympics. Kelly Hodgkinson, gold, 800-metre final last night in Paris.
Great.
Absolutely brilliant.
Some good news.
I mean, might win gold in the 1,500 metres.
Yes.
Which is
yes.
great.
Quite possibly.
Exciting.
And this fight between Elon Musk and the government. Goodness me, what's going to happen there? I mean, it's more, it's more excuse for the government to clamp down hard, isn't it, on social media? What are they going to do about it all?
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully not clamp down hard on social media.
Well,
they've got quite a fight in their hands with Elon Musk.
Yeah, what are they going to do with him?
Handle himself.
What are they going to do?
He owns the company.
He does.
I mean, anyway, Cameron, Emily.
Good luck. We'll be watching.
Thank you.
12 till 3 o'clock. But next, we're going to hear from a Yorkshire teenager who was mauled by a 50-kilogram Rescue XL bully, but doesn't want them banned. Don't miss this. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for Northern Ireland and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
.11:40, Britain's News on GB News, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So a Yorkshire teenager says that she's lucky to be alive after being mauled by a 50-kilogram rescue XL bully whilst working at an animal shelter. Do you know how much 50 kilograms is?
Over £100.
Yes.
£110, I think, and I think we should do it in pounds.
8 stone?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So our Yorkshire reporter, Anna Riley, has the story. And just as a warning, this report does contain some rather graphic images.
Animal lover Gilana Milner feared she was going to die after being mauled by an XL bully. She was left with serious injuries to her leg and chest and needed emergency surgery. The attack at a rescue centre where Gilana worked lasted for 5 terrifying minutes.
I thought he was going to bite me and let go, like you see with everyone else at work when we've all got bitten at some point. But he never actually let go, so then it took a second to realise you're probably going to die. And then you can't really feel the pain of it. You can just feel like the sensation of him biting you. And I was watching him bite me, I couldn't do anything. All I could think about was my mum at the moment, the people that I loved. I've never really thought about dying like that before.
The assault has left the teenager with permanent nerve damage and emotional trauma.
I can wake up throughout the nights with a dream that a dog's just latched onto me or bitten me or anything like that, and I'd wake up hyperventilating. There's moments where I'm on the street and I see like a bully or something, and it plays in my mind again about what happened. And I went to go see this lady with a big fancy name, and she said that I have this thing where it's like a survival instinct. I'm always thinking about how I'm going to die in a situation. And she said that's located in the back of the brain and it's never going to go away.
It's against the law to sell, give away, abandon or breed from an XL bully, and illegal to own an XL bully without an exemption certificate. But despite what she went through, Gilana disagrees with the ban on the breed.
I think they should all be given a chance and shouldn't be put to sleep just because they're XLs. That's discrimination in a way. some people think it's just in the brain, it's just like bred into them. There's like a big debate about it, which I suppose to some level could be true. But then again, I think the biggest impact is how they're brought up as a dog, the trauma that they've been through.
It's Gilana's dream to work with animals, and she refuses to let her ordeal stop her. Anna Riley, GB News, Wakefield.
Wow.
Bless her.
Yeah, talk about dog lover. They wouldn't have had a second chance with me, would you?
I'm scared of all dogs, remember?
Yeah.
I think women like that are amazing. People that work with animals like that and are so kind and loving, and then they even get attacked, and then they still don't think should be banned. Look,
These
amazing.
dogs,
We're just glad she's okay.
The wrong XL bully dog is a killer dog.
There are. Right, listen, there are warnings that vapes laced with the drug spice are making their way around British streets and getting into the hands of teenagers. If you've got a teenager in your life, you don't want to miss this. They've been turning up at school playgrounds even. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Apparently, almost 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds, we don't know whether that's men or women, but they say that women shouldn't breastfeed in public. 19% would even go as far as labelling it disgusting.
Well, only a quarter of Brits say that women shouldn't have to cover up when they're breastfeeding. So clearly there is a big debate here and one to get to the bottom of. And to do so, we're joined by parenting journalist Annette Kellu. Really good to see you this morning, Annette.
Really good to see you.
Why is this stigma still existing in our society?
I think we've got a case here going on of double standards. I don't know about you, but I live near a park, OK? One little hint of sun, the men get completely naked. Honestly, you've never seen anything like it. The bodies are out, all different shapes and sizes. So why is it not OK for a woman to feed her baby? You know, we've got this whole thing. They're OK to be naked doing what they want. Why can't a woman just feed her baby? Why is it shameful in 2024? And it's interesting what you say about the 18 to 25-year-olds, because I really want to know, are they men or women? Because I feel like they'd be men.
I was going to say, have you got a hunch? Have you got a suspicion?
Yes, I have. And I think as well, they're thinking of them as sexy time, you know? And I feel like they're not... Well, maybe that's because they're bombarded with images and they see things like that they're seeing it in that context. But it's really not. It's feeding the baby. It's simple. Shouldn't be shameful.
But do you think for men it's like they can't see the difference? There's so much porn in society, isn't there, that breasts are sexualised and seen as this sexual object and not actually for their main primary purpose, which is actually feeding a child.
Immediate association.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they can't.
And you can't see that they could have two functions.
Absolutely. And to them as well, I feel like they see it, and on the other side of it, they think like, ooh, mummy, and that brings up weird feelings for them, maybe.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So a new study has shown that 1 in 6 vapes confiscated in schools contain the illegal drug spice. 1 in 6?
That is shocking. So we're going to talk now to a consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert, Mike Barnes. Mike, morning to you. Can you explain to people tuning in what spice is and why we should be really concerned that this is finding its way into teenagers' vapes?
Well, we certainly should be concerned about it. It was actually discovered, if you like, in 2008, I think it was, by a legitimate researcher in the States, South Carolina, who was experimenting with making synthetic cannabinoids, the substances that are found in cannabis, to see if they had medical value. And he soon found that this stuff he made, which he called spice. It didn't have medical value. It was very nasty, very dangerous, full of side effects. So that research was stopped. But since then, sadly, illegal chemists have been making similar compounds, and we should remember that spice isn't one thing. There's about 170 different potential compounds now made all over the world. And they really are very dangerous. They're nothing to do with cannabis anymore. They're totally different. They're still called sometimes synthetic cannabinoids, but they're nothing to do with cannabis. The effects are far more serious.
And what are those effects, Mike, especially on a young person? What might it do to them?
Sadly, a whole variety of things, mainly mental illness, paranoia, breathing problems, heart problems, kidney problems, liver problems, seizures, panic attacks, paranoia, and death, sadly, is also a risk. They're incredibly dangerous. At one point, they accounted for over half the deaths in prisons. They got rife in prison population. And now, sadly, they're finding their way, as you've said, into schools. They're about 100 times more potent than THC, which is found in
And do these, Mike, do the teenagers realise that the spice is in this, in the vape? They don't?
Many won't, because what the drug dealers do is the stuff's made in large quantities in places like China and India, I'm afraid, and imported. And what they then do is dilute it and spray it onto herbal material. And they can spray it, for example, on a cannabis plant. So it looks like cannabis or it looks like a herb. They adulterate it also with other things. One is rat poison, which is meant to make the effect last longer. And of course, rat poison is not an ideal thing to vape either, as some children have died from bleeding as a result of the rat poison. So, you know, it's a very nasty, very dangerous thing. And the children can, of course, be fooled into the fact that it's fairly benign. They're just buying a little bit of weed on the street, whereas in fact, they're buying weed laced and covered with these synthetic chemicals.
How would a child know, or even an adult, if they're buying a vape, how would they know, Mike, whether it is the spice version or not?
Well, sadly, you often don't till you've taken it when it's too late. One way you can do it is on price. Generally speaking, I have to generalize here, the price varies hugely. Generally speaking, it's cheaper than buying proper cannabis on the black market. So if you offered cheap cannabis, be very, very careful, because it's likely not to be cheap cannabis. It's likely to be covered with the synthetic chemical.
And the thing is, Mike, a lot of people say, oh, well, vapes are much safer than smoking. And I sort of get that argument to woo people who are smokers, older people, to woo smokers off of tobacco. But vapes are wooing more and more young people into smoking who might never have smoked in the first place. And now we're discovering this problem too, of the spice.
Yes, sadly, that's right. And of course, there was that other scandal in the States where e-liquids in vapes were contaminated and several people died in the States. So, yeah, vapes are safer than smoking. The main reason for that is that the temperature of the vape is much less. So if you smoke a cigarette, the temperature is about 1,000 centigrade and you can get carcinogens released, hence lung cancer. Whereas vapes, the temperature, perhaps a fifth of that, about 180 to 200 centigrade. So it tends to be safer and more controllable. But of course, it doesn't mean it's completely safe, completely controllable, as we've just illustrated. So yes, vapes have their issues. Overall, it's probably better than smoking, but it's, it depends what's in the vape, clearly. And if we can contaminate vapes like this, then they've got a real problem.
Yeah, some people their ears might have pricked up, Mike Barnes, when we said at the beginning that you're a medical cannabis expert, because a lot of people will still be labouring under the illusion that there is no such thing as medical cannabis in this country. What is the state of play in that particular area now?
Yeah, well, the law changed, again, you're quite right, Bev, that a lot of people didn't know this. The law changed in November 2018, nearly 6 years ago, which enabled doctors to prescribe cannabis, doctors, specialists, to prescribe cannabis, available in the NHS, but sadly that's not much happened. And now mainly private. There's nearly 50,000 patients in this country now prescribed cannabis, which is remarkably helpful for mainly chronic pain, chronic anxiety, and other things like epilepsy. And it's the little child with epilepsy that changed the law in 2018. So it's incredibly good for some conditions, as long as it's safely prescribed and the products are to a high quality, which they are in this country. So as a medical product, it's remarkably helpful.
And do you see that becoming more popular?
Yes, no, there's about 1,000 new patients every month are getting a private prescription.
Wow.
There will be a
Amazing.
limit to that because it's private and most people can't afford private fees. It should be available at the NHS, and hopefully it will be. With the new government, perhaps they'll look at it more kindly, perhaps, than the last government. Who knows? But well, definitely, it's here to stay. It's now legal in 71 countries around the world, so it's medical cannabis is a phenomenon that's with us, I'm pleased to say.
Fascinating.
A lot of people.
Fascinating. You learn something new every day, don't you?
Yeah, you
Professor
really
Mike
do.
Barnes, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Right, that's it from us this morning.
Well, let's hope we have a night of calm in our inner cities
Is it only
tonight.
Tuesday?
Yeah, certainly is. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain. It's with Cameron Walker and Emily, and we're going to see you tomorrow, usual time, 9:30. See you then.
Thanks both. Coming up, as the Justice Minister suggests courts could sit overnight to process the hundreds of rioters arrested across the country, we'll be asking, are there enough prison spaces to house them?
Yes, and the war of words heats up between Elon Musk, the billionaire owner of social media platform X, and the UK government. He's claiming that the UK could be heading for a civil war, and also he suggests that we're suffering from two-tier policing. What will the government's response be? All of that after the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Most of us will have a fine day today, but across the northwest there's going to be lots of showers around, and it's a pretty grey start over parts of eastern England. Some mostly light rain and drizzle here, which will continue to edge eastwards across East Anglia over the next few hours before kind of fizzling out. Sunny spells for much of Wales, northern England and southwest England and eastern Scotland. For western Scotland, Northern Ireland, there will be sunny spells, but expect showers to come and go as well, so pretty heavy ones. A few of them for northwest England, but in the sunny spells here, 20 degrees. Could get to 24, 25 across the southeast when the sun comes out later this afternoon. But a fresher feel in the northwest with fairly brisk winds, and look at this, lots of showers just streaming in as we go through the day, with the winds coming from the southwest, far northeast of Scotland, seeing some shelter. So here, not many showers and some good spells of sunshine, but plenty of showers throughout today across Northern Ireland. We'll see some getting into northwest England and at times into Wales, but a good part of England and Wales will be dry for most of the day, and that rain fizzling out certainly by this evening across East Anglia. So a fine end to the day here. For many, it'll be a dry and a fine night across central and eastern parts, but further west, always the likelihood of more showers. And look at this, more wet and windy weather coming into western Scotland as we go through the early hours. It's going to be a soggy start to proceedings here tomorrow. Temperatures mostly holding up in the teens, certainly in towns and cities across England and Wales. A little cooler in rural spots, so close to average really for the time of year. Sunny start then for the Midlands and eastern England during Wednesday, and for much of the east it'll stay fine throughout the day, but it will be quite breezy, and certainly further west, gusty winds and plenty of showers. A mix of bright spells, and then the next minute you've got a downpour coming in. Temperatures again close to average, so high teens across the north, low 20s further south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like.